if your company is used to hosting corporate events that don't have any strategy attached to them, you're probably going to be spinning your wheels a lot of the time, bringing stakeholders into the room with each other and then not being able to calculate outputs that could benefit your company. That kind of frustration involved with a lack of output and lack of clear direction when you're putting people together can harm your brand and negatively impact your bottom line. Why not do the opposite and actually apply strategy to external events, host them regularly through the year, and know exactly what you're going to get out of them when you press send on the invites to the various people that you want to gather. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 10 different formats that you can use to regularly apply strategy to gathering people for external events at your company. Marketers, founders, comms leads, sales leaders, everybody has to run events at a company, often cases, but they might not have a playbook. We're going to run through that so that you can develop your own playbook. So we all know that events matter. If you don't know what kind of event to run for what purpose, I'm going to help you out. Remember that done the wrong way, events can take forever, cost a ton of money, and waste a ton of time on procurement and internal communications and approvals and bureaucratic red tape, right? So we don't want any of that in our lives. We want to run with our programming forward. We want to get things done and be able to host sessions that help our business. And so let's jump into it. Now, if you watch the Corporate 101, Corporate Events 101, the main thing that I'm trying to convey is to avoid being reactive when you're thinking about event planning. You want to be proactive. So often cases, we've all been there, right? People like jump in your office or they'll ping you on Slack and they'll say, hey, can you just do a panel or host a networking night? That would be great for engaging our stakeholders, or run a big tentpole event because I just came back from a conference and I thought that was a great idea. We should be doing that. For whatever reason, someone interrupts your flow and tells you to do something that involves producing an event, and it's like, oh my God, that's not my wheelhouse. Don't freak out, okay? Don't freak out. I'm here, we're here together. You can learn a bunch of wisdom from Startwell. We've been around for 8 years. We've hosted thousands, tens of thousands of people here, from hundreds of companies to run all types of corporate sessions. And now I'm here to share that with you. So don't freak out. All right. So typically, again, people are going to kind of push for event formats that, get chosen just ad hoc. Like they've seen someone do something and they're like, we should do this. And they're just copycatting. But the problem is then you get mismatched, expectations of what the event is, and then attendees don't really get value from attending. And that could be any type of stakeholder that you're bringing together, especially now we're talking about external events. They're kind of important because you might have partners, vendors, clients, prospective clients coming into the room to engage with you guys. You don't want them to be stressful, but you want them to be to perform well. And part of that is just about thinking through what type of events you actually need to host for who. All right. So I'm going to give you that roadmap. So this framework we're calling the external event stack. This is the Startwell's external event stack. And it's basically a simple system that shows the 10 types of external corporate events and which one is actually for what. If you think of events like a toolbox, the idea is that you're not going to reach for your hammer every single time you're hosting an event, right? I'm going to give you all the tools in your toolbox. All right. So let's consider this stack of events in 3 functional phases. So you could think of how you program them in a succession, whether that's like through the year, or you could recombine them based off of what your intentions are, whatever your strategy is at your company. First phase of events. So we're going to talk about like building authority and awareness. These events are really important for new cos, new products in market, or any situation where you feel like your company needs to develop authority and build awareness in the market. And there's 3 types that I've got here. One is thought leadership events. Another one is educational sessions. And another one is product launches. All right. So you're building authority and awareness through these three different types. And we'll deep dive into these in subsequent videos, or maybe I'll come back to it in a second. The second phase you want to consider is once you've developed authority in a segment, you want to kind of engage stakeholders and build trust with your brand, with your product, with your service. So these events now get a little bit deeper under the hood, and you're looking at workshops, customer events, partner events, and micro conferences. Okay. Um, Ideally, the goal is to deepen relationships. As you deepen relationships, the next thing you want to do is say, hey, wait, we actually have stakeholders who engage with us in a regular fashion. They know our brand, they might be users of our product. So let's develop a community and let's position that community with some momentum so that it's driving some business outcomes for us. These types of events in startups are often meetups. You could also have cultural or brand experiences, which you see in fashion and beauty a lot with pop ups, and then sales enablement events. So those are anything where you're going to interface with potential clients. And the idea here, our goal in this category is really to create advocacy for whatever you're selling, and create pull for you. You want to drive inbound or inspire inbound. Okay, we're going to break these down into a way that you could actually use them now. Let's go a little deeper under the hood. All right. So we're deep diving into the first phase, which is setting the foundation. You want to start with events that actually teach people things, right? So kind of like what I'm doing right now, I'm teaching you all about uh, actual events. You want to host events that teach people about your products or services, because my product and service is events. I mean, that's what we do here at Startwell in Toronto. Um, Again, most first time external events fail because they're trying to sell instead of educate. This happens a lot when an executive might come to you and say, wow, we should do this event. I was at this event. It was awesome. They're revved up and they're excited. Are they buying what was on sale there? Probably not. They just saw the format and thought it was cool. So that excitement is great, but again, you don't want to mismatch excitement around an experience with an ask, especially not for a first touch with a client or prospective client if it's a sales function at an event. Don't sell things at events. Often cases that won't work well, and it definitely doesn't help to develop trust in your brand. So if you're setting the foundation in this first phase, you want to do events that really teach people rather than sell to them. Okay, let's look at that first type that I mentioned, thought leadership events. So thought leadership events are really for industry peers, prospects, the media, and other types of partners for your company. In terms of format, like how do you actually manifest thought leadership or convey thought leadership to the audience of people that you're gathering? Well, you could put people on stage for different types of formats. They could be any type of talk, like a keynote is often cases the words people use, but like a talk where one person's on stage talking to the audience about something that's their domain expertise. You could also do a fireside chat that's essentially an interview, two people on stage talking. Fireside, as opposed to interview, to lay up the nomenclature, is that like most people will think of firesides as casual. You're having a casual chat next to a fireside about things that you're really passionate about. It's not really as combative as an interview, but what we're finding more often is that interviews where you actually have structured questions that are really good that the audience wants to ask can be very powerful. And I would suggest this too. Here's a pro tip: solicit questions from the people that are coming to the event before they arrive on site so that you could feed that into the interview on stage, and everyone in the audience feels more engaged because they wanted to ask that question and now it's being asked on stage without having to pass a mic around and do all that awkwardness for a Q&A after the fact. Another format is panels. So this is where you get more than two people on stage. Sorry, I flubbed that. More than two people on stage. I'm excited. I'm running through all this content that I love. So let's say you have three or four people on stage. Really cool, because now you get so much coverage of the topic matter. So long as the moderator is good, you need someone who's going to enable each person to share by making them feel comfortable, but also, raising a little bit of humor and levity to the situation so that they're open to sharing. and they're in the moment. Because if you're not in the moment, you're not necessarily going to feel like you're contributing. And I see this a lot where people on panels will often cases kind of like sit very upright and quiet because they're in front of a bunch of people and they're nervous. And then they don't share because they're thinking about whether they're going to fart. You know, like they have other things on their mind. You don't want that. You want them to be in the moment and be casual and be able to share. All right. So there's different types of formats for like what a thought leadership event um, can do to put people on stage. But ultimately, you want to develop authority, right, for your company if you're hosting this sort of format, and also make you seem credible. So you're leveraging the thought leaders' uh, cachet, the value that they're offering the audience, and the status that the audience will already see your speakers at. You're leveraging that to benefit your own brand, your own company. Um, I think that designs, yeah, I guess here's the thing. Okay, this is a sticky point. I've written it in a weird way here on my computer, but like the idea is you want to consider for thought leadership events. Yes, we can record the content on stage and you can splice and dice it and share it out so people will see it after the fact. But what's more important than simply watching is using our mouths. We want people to drive word of mouth after our events when they're thought leadership events. So it's important for whoever is going to be running interviews, even the talks that you program, like who's talking about what, you want to think about the strategy around the content on stage so that the output or one of the big outputs is that everyone in the room will drive word of mouth about your brand and about the experience. So think of specific things that will stick in people's brains that are either, particular anecdotes like, oh, I've never heard Rory Sutherland talk about how Google did that ad in 1997. Whatever the context is, if there's an anecdote that's unique, people will remember it. If there's a shared moment on stage, someone flubs something like I just did and everybody laughs in the audience, that's something that, people will remember. But also if they learned something that they could take into their work or something that's so cool that they want to tell other people about, now you're winning. Continuing this idea of like teaching people through events, you're developing a foundation that could be strengthening your brand or a new identity that you're launching in market with a product release or something like that. The second format is educational events. So you want to bring different stakeholders into the room to educate them. And those could be customers, those could be users, those could be sales prospects, those could be practitioners, which could be like consultants that use your tool in their work. The formats could be classes, actual classes around topics. You could do product demos to these people, offer training sessions. So you're doing hands-on, like this is how you use this thing, or just running explainers. So you're kind of giving them a little bit more color to a story that they already know. Ultimately, you want to build trust through delivering value to the people that are gathered in the room. And in our, corporate events 101, when we talked about layouts, you might remember classroom or seminar style. That's for all of these types of educational events, really, where you've got like rows of tables, or and everyone's facing the stage. That's a very good format for when they need to do laptop work or hands-on work individually. If you want them to work in groups, you're looking at banquet style for this format of educational events. If people leave smarter than when they arrived, then you've earned the permission to keep that relationship going. So remember, trust isn't something that you just know is there. You kind of have to activate it. And then when it's active, you've got that momentum to leverage. The next type of this kind of foundational event is going to be workshops and hands-on sessions. So you could educate people on stuff, and then you could also give them things to play with, which will deepen the relationship with it. So again, same types of people, like customers, it could be working teams, specialists, and even buyers. So there's sales functions, there's educational functions that are just for partners and people that already bought in. Whatever you need, consider workshops as hands-on things. Essentially, you're looking at small groups. So you could break your larger team into small working groups to focus on a particular task individually. Exercises, so there could be something for a whole big group to do together or individually in the room. And then, you might do like framework development sessions as well, uh, or tool development sessions. A lot of companies might look to stakeholders through these hands-on sessions as a knowledge base. So you're actually trying to solicit information from people who you trust already to inform the future of whatever your product or service is. So some software companies will do this with high value customers and say, "You're power users. We want to know what's broken," and use this sort of like event format to be able to solicit that information. And ultimately, you want to develop skills amongst the people that are there, and that includes your team, and just get buy-in. You want to all get on the same page through these formats. I really think the participation uh, beats presentations. So it's nice to be on stage, but it's even nicer to like laugh with people and get in there with your hands and work together. Um, and that enables a sense of ownership, right? So if your interaction with your product and service is one of participation, then people are going to feel like representatives of it. So if you're trying to evoke this kind of super user group to be more empowered to enable word of mouth marketing or something, this is really great. Like do workshops all the time and get feedback through community in person, because that's going to get more viral than simply sending out videos to people. Maybe we'll do some of these videos live. Um, Now let's take a look at the second phase of this deep, this deep dive into kind of external events, and that's the counterintuitive shift. Once people show up, companies make events bigger instead of better, and that's kind of a really bad situation. Everyone falls into this trap that like, hey, we had 150 people RSVP for our 100-person event. Wow, it was such a success, Judy. You're doing a great job. Why don't we do 500 people next month? Legitimately, I had this conversation yesterday with a client of ours where they had a very successful IRL event for the first time. They had like 150 people in the room for 2 days, and everyone wanted more, and there was a wait list. So now they're going to do a 500-person event next year. And my caution to them was, well, why not split that into multiple events where you've got lots of touch points with the same total number of people, but you're spreading the interactions through the year, and you're able to actually get more content through the year out of all those, like, let's say 100% events instead of one 500% event. So that's the contrarian insight that I think I always recommend to you, is to say smaller events create more trust, right, than large ones. If you're in a room with tons of people, it's hard to actually understand the content being presented, but also to engage with people in the room. Like you're just not going to make friends. So you want everyone in the room to make friends, because then they're going to be more friendly. And if they're more friendly, they're going to spread word of mouth about you. All right. So I think, again, there are things to consider about trust building through events that are really important. If you can use the same venue over and over and over again, or the same vendor of space, and they have different rooms, like here at Startwell, we've got 20,000 square feet. You could choose one of 3 big rooms or one of like 20 small rooms every time that you book with us, but people know the address. So if they keep coming back to the same address or they're in the same room, um, it's a really valuable way to build trust, because they know where they're going. And all that apprehension of we're arriving at an event and it takes an hour to figure out if we're comfortable, that's out of the way. So you could just hit the ground running. You also want the same partners, to build trust. You want the same people involved in producing the events, and you want repeatable formats. So knowing these formats for how to host is really important, because you could do them more often. And then, of course, you could kind of intermingle the formats. So you're combining them to create unique programming, but they always feel familiar to people. So consistency beats novelty. Try and be consistent with how you host events, and it's going to help develop trust. All right, the fourth category of external events that we'll consider today is meetups and socials. Again, in the software world, you see a lot of this. In other types of products and services, you don't see it as much, and I think there's an opportunity there for a lot of companies, is basically when you get a bunch of like-minded professionals together, and they might be like user groups, they might be customer groups, They might be people that would be considered to be partners or competitors even with each other. Get them in the same room. Just because they compete against each other in market doesn't mean that they don't have a relationship with you that can help you. So, especially if they're your customers. And then ecosystems. So there might be like different types of companies that fit into a programming mandate. So I'll take an example from software. Um, like if you are a venture capital firm, just programming events to bring potential investees into the room might be kind of boring and then make them all feel like they're competing for the same dollars from you. So instead, a VC firm might do an ecosystem event where they're bringing government officials out to learn about policy. They're bringing some investees out. They're bringing portfolio companies that have already been invested in. They're bringing out deep science executives or let's call it researchers even from education institutions or from big massive companies to share their knowledge. And they're kind of creating a really engaging meetup or social that leverages the power of ecosystem to develop community. And that's kind of part of it is you want to, whether it's to develop community or otherwise, you want to develop brand affinity through meetups and through the community, the power of community, really kind of get as many voices at the table singing your praises, and that drives word of mouth. So that's a big value for community meetups and socials. And you want to represent yourself, of course, as social glue, right? So if you're developing community and your brand is at the center of it all, and it's a diverse community, you're going to reach more people and they'll all be able to see why you're valuable in their own way, which exponentializes your reach. Customer appreciation events is something that's often cases in the modern era overlooked. It's a big one. So for a format that you want to kind of like host every now and again, I think you want to think about this category a lot, which is retention is cheaper to maintain than new customer acquisition. So treat those existing customers like friends and the advocates of your brand as well as friends. And how do you do that? Well, very intimate kind of things. So you could host dinners. That's super intimate. Get like 5, 10 people around a table at a nice restaurant or at a venue that is served by catering staff. So it's extremely boutique and special. You could do cocktail events. So you're just doing like short engagements. People come before or after their dinner. Before their dinner, I think people probably would be more awake and sober if they're coming for a cocktail before dinner. So after work socials, invite only sessions are really good. We haven't talked much about this. I'll do a specific video about it, but talking about if you're inviting people and they can't publicly learn about your event, it's special. They got the invite. Now, where that really works is in super intimate gatherings. If you do an invite only 100-person gathering, it's not going to have the same magic as an invite only 10-person gathering because those 10 people feel like there's a reason why they're there. Those 100 people don't. They just feel like, okay, you're not charging for this event. And ultimately, remember your goal here is for retention and advocacy. This is kind of the theme that seems to be recurring for external events. But you want to really focus on if someone's a customer or a partner of your brand already, you want to retain that loyalty, but do it in a way that you're not paying for it. It's not sending out a Starbucks gift card at Christmas. Because let's face it, there might not be Starbucks on the corner next Christmas. So those cards might just expire. Um, so anyway, loyalty grows when customers feel seen and when they don't feel sold to. It's really important. If you've already sold to somebody, treat them like a friend. Figure out their needs in a social forum that's intimate. Then you can kind of re-pitch them if you need to, or upsell or cross-sell them. But if you start with the sale and you've already sold them, they'll feel like it's too transactional and it cheapens the relationship. Let's talk about partner and ecosystem events, okay? Typically, companies don't think about this enough, but the value of celebrating strategic partners and resellers and any type of collaborator in your business is really valuable. So you could do co-hosted events. That's a really good format where you're bringing a partner to host another type of format. Like it could be a thought leadership event, but you're bringing your partners in now on stage, but also to get them as maybe curators of who's going to speak in addition to them. And you're getting them bought into exponentializing your reach to their network, which is really great. You could do, again, joint talks where it's like you and a partner talking about the case study of how you work together. And people love talking about, the things that they're doing that are fun and that work and that are collaborative. So it can be organic. You don't even need to pre-prep joint talks like that. And then also the idea of like a shared audience is really powerful too. Like I'm company X, I've got 50 people that could come out to something. You're company Y, we know each other, and you got 50 people. Let's come up with a larger engagement. Or if we want to do something super intimate, you invite two people, we'll invite two people. Get 5 companies to invite 2 people. Now, wow, you've got a whole bunch of people at the table that come from different backgrounds and that will learn organically why you're all valuable to each other. And that immediately buys trust. All right, so shared stages create shared momentum. Collaborating with people really helps. And it might sound difficult, so keep the format small to start, and then grow from there. Start working with other people to co-host. And as long as you have your core logistics on how you're hosting and what your format of your event is, it should be really easy to bring people in as partners to co-host. Micro conferences are also another format for external events that people forget about because they think a conference has to be this huge thing in like Boca Raton or by the airport or in Mexico, whatever sounds fabulous to you, where you're using the destination as an excuse to drive attendance. And that's fine. I'm not throwing shade on it. It's just that conferences don't need to be about um, sneaky tactics to get people to come. And if you shrink the format of a conference, you realize there's a lot of value to it. So if you look at niche audiences with a shared interest, they're worth considering programming for. And you could do this in multiple ways. So you could do a multi-session programming where you've got like multiple tracks programmed through the day. Now you're taking 100 people and you're giving them 5 rooms and really high touch experiences with 5 topics for the morning programming, let's say, and they all come together for the afternoon. So they're learning things that they can socialize at lunch or socialize in their larger team session in the afternoon. So programming tracks, you could literally just bring a bunch of people together. And even if those programming tracks are not synonymous, it's not like from this time slot, you're either going in room A, B, or C. And instead, you've got only one breakout, and that one breakout rotates in theme through the day. So you've got the bulk of people in one room, but there's always an excuse to get out of the room. But when they get out of the room, they're meeting new people. It's musical chairs through the day. Different types of breakouts can be calculated in different ways, but the micro conference is a massive event motion for 2026 to consider and 2027 and beyond. Ultimately, people want niche, they want to be together, they want to learn, they want to socialize, grow their network, and you can do that all very manageably with the right venue selection. So here at Startwell, we do this every week, and it's amazing because we've got so many venues, so many rooms that people can program in at one location under one roof. It's not like a hotel where you've got 2 different wings and people are getting lost halfway running around between venues and they're like, your programming schedule ends up running late. So if you program it at the right place, like Startwell here in Toronto, then you can have all these rooms in one place and people aren't getting lost in the hallways. The rooms should be the hallways. That's a side note, by the way. Like everyone says, the value of a conference is the spaces in between. Well, if the whole thing is in between, you've got a valuable conference. So smaller focused conferences deliver more value than large tentpole events. Now just focus on what does that mean for the experience you're crafting? If you want people to have high touch interactions, then you can create an event that just does that. And it doesn't need to be something that's only a social. It can definitely be with presented materials and focus on the other formats that I've mentioned and take them and whip them into one thing that's a micro conference. All right, now the third phase that we're going to talk about in terms of how you can think of different external event formats is about mastery and scale, right? So there's this kind of idea of like developing the depth of experience in these events. And you're treating the events as a platform, not as a campaign. So it's not necessarily like a one-off thing to win business. This is a much larger scope project to think of mastery and scale as an output of your corporate events. And you want to develop a compounding effect through this type of programming. So events can feed content, right? Events have people on stage, their talks become recorded videos. Content feeds community. Well, the people that you're, developing relationships with around your brand see content after the event, outside of the event, maybe during the event, if it's live feeds we're talking about, broadcasts out to the public, LinkedIn Lives, YouTube, or private link. And the community feeds demand. So this is the cycle. This is the flywheel. Events feed content, content feeds the community, and the community ends up feeding demand for your product, service, or brand. Um, and now you're dealing with something very powerful. All right. So ultimately, you want your audience to show up without being invited. And that's literally what the flywheel will deliver for you. If your audience is customers, you want inbound. Ultimately, we all want inbound and we don't want to pay for it. Paying doesn't make sense. Performance marketing doesn't necessarily work. That misnomer of being able to pay for a customer is kind of falling flat in this new era of marketing. So thinking of events, even within the marketing lens, is about developing inbound sales by building trust, activating networks that become communities, and then letting word of mouth really propel people with momentum towards your brand. So in this category, a really great thing to do is a product launch or product announcement event. Now, ultimately, you're looking for like amplifiers of voice. So you might be inviting the press or influencers, customers, prospects, other types of partners. You're really drilling down into your stakeholder network to be able to give them information that they can help push out. You could do product demos at these events. You could do any type of reveal. And you could also talk about the roadmap. And so this is a very interesting thing. Very few people, especially if they're in rapid prototyping mode, like you're a NewCo AI startup and you're developing new every day, okay, your roadmap might fry brains. But if you're a more slower paced conventional business, being able to give your stakeholders a glimpse of what's coming up in 6, 12 months is powerful. Do it every 3 months, and now you've got a quarterly series of events. You got 4 years, 4 events a year that is engaging stakeholders and getting them bought into the vision. And if you prove that you can meet your roadmap milestones along this event track, then they're going to be reinforced each event, and they're going to be happy that you're developing as you promised, and their trust in you will just exponentialize. And then you can lever that if that's important to your sales strategy or otherwise. So you want to build awareness and momentum through product launches and announcements. And remember that a launch is an experience. Like, it's important for people to really engage at that event with you and your products and your services. It's not a slide deck. Like, you shouldn't be pushing information on people if the experience is supposed to compel them to think larger and deeper. So if the moment is impactful, again, it drives word of mouth. It's a lasting experience. Okay, let's talk about sales enablement events. So I've been talking about sales a lot through this video, but ultimately sales enablement events is its own category of external facing event. And essentially, this is a great, I call this the honeypot. I use this a lot, and clients at Start will use it a lot, where you're bringing prospects into the same room as customers. It's a very important mix. It's one that takes time to figure out, your guest list for. That's the most kind of maybe difficult thing about planning these events. You want to make sure the right mix of people's in the room, but it's an easy motion that should be a repeat function as part of your go-to-market strategy. So sales enablement events can be really easy to produce. You don't need banners and branding and all this craziness. If your goal is simply to develop the trust that's already been built with existing customers and motivate it to push into your lead segments, and then create content that can do the same thing out there in the world. Great content formats to present at these events is case studies, because people immediately will connect with why it's valuable to use your product or service. And if you're bringing your customers on a stage and they're in the room and they're speakers, then it's now super valuable for your prospects to meet the speakers because they're part of the event and they're hanging out. This is a huge thing actually that I didn't talk about until now, is that often cases at events, people in the audience don't get enough engagement with the speakers. They're almost there inevitably to like meet a speaker. And even if they didn't know the bio of the person who's on stage, they might see that person talking and be like, wow, that guy was really interesting. I want to pick his brain on something. And they're inspired in the moment. But if they don't get the chance, they leave feeling unfulfilled. If they do get the chance, they'll sing praises about the event for months. And I just had that experience where I was in Banff at this conference called The Gathering, which is a cult brand conference. And I was invited to do a Q&A with one of the keynote speakers who was talking about um, really the evolution of SEO and how it is going to move in LLMs and how people can work easily to index their brands, their websites into search criteria on the chatbots and or whatever you want to call it through AI and prompt-based AI. And it was a cool talk. He gave this like rapid fire, let me drop the gems kind of talk. And then we had a Q&A, and I had like tons of people afterwards come up to me and say, I'm so glad I came to this talk because I was on the fence about it. And then I heard your questions and your answers and how you dialogued with that keynote speaker. And that made the talk for me, right? So I spent time talking to people about being on stage, and they really enjoyed that. So something to think about is you're planning these experiences and make sure that your speakers are actually in the room because they become brand advocates and you're leveraging their trust through the event. Don't just wait for that to be the film of the stage that you pump out on LinkedIn afterwards. Use the experience of people in the room to really drive home this idea that they're all there together and they're there for a reason and they're all in the same level. You don't want that, you're higher than me and I'm lower than you, and one day I'll be like you. They're all there together. Super important at sales enablement events to consider that. And ultimately, these events are for pipeline acceleration. You want a quick access to developing leads, right? So if you can use your customers to sell your product, very important. And what they're selling is trust in your brand. They're not selling the actual functionality and replacing SDRs or something. And ultimately, that's kind of a core aspect here. Remember that like people trust other people, which means customers, more than they trust your salespeople. If they know that someone's singing your praises because that person actually loves what they're talking about, they're gonna totally trust them. Think about hiring. This happens all the time. How many companies will hire someone because of a personal, relationship or proximity over a stack of resumes or a recruiter that they have to pay a fee to? Happens all the time. Last format to talk about in this video about external events, it's cultural or brand experiences, okay? What does that mean? You want to engage people with your brand. So these are for a broader market, right? Or a creative community, people that are interested in new things. You can do art shows, screenings of video content, live recording, so people are part of it, of a content creation experience, or even performances. So these are like pop-ups. A lot of people will talk about pop-ups in an urban vernacular as being these experiences of brand. It could be like a makeup brand that does a pop-up around the launch of a new mascara. Something that actually we did something interesting recently in one of our studios here at Startwell. There was a makeup brand called Charlotte Tilbury that wanted to launch a new mascara that was like for thicker, longer lashes. And so we did this activation where we brought in a whole bunch of influencers and created all this content and branded the interior of a space. So we gave this amazing experience to this core set of people that they're using to market. Well, what if they had 2 more days to that experience and brought the larger public into it and made everyone feel like an influencer? It would have been a massive sales motion that exponentialized their brand reach within this segment rather than just treating it as a content capture opportunity. It should have been something that was more interactive with the public. But again, who knows? Not enough product to go around. There was a roadshow. Staff resources were limited. But that's something to learn from, I think. So ultimately, you want to develop brand identity and establish yourself as different in your market by using this sort of cultural or brand experience format. And when your brand hosts culture, remember that it instantly becomes part of the culture. When your brand hosts culture, it becomes part of the culture. This gives you buy-in to a community, right? So when you're talking about developing brand affinity through events, really, really powerful to think of pop-ups or whatever you want to describe this category as, not just as these like cheap experiences for an hour, something to do on Sunday, but instead something that brings people into an experience that they don't even realize they have already brought value to by participating, right? People are always looking extractively at these brand experiences like, but the funny thing is they are the reason why the brand experience exists. So thinking about that in your content planning, in your design, in your, post-show content marketing is important. But that sums up this framework. Now you know 10 types of external corporate events and when to use each one for maximum effect. You can now design outcomes. Be sure to check out our Corporate Event Planning 101 if you haven't already, and our video on internal event formats. So you can start planning and strategizing for effective events within your company.